Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Sorry I didn't give you much notice of this live stream. I did it with like 15 minutes notice. I just had to wait for the puppy to be asleep because she's run me ragged today. She's been really naughty today. Anyhow, here we are to talk about cadaver dogs. So, as promised, I want to go through this study with you. Let me put it on the screen right now. There we go. This is the study that was conducted in 2017 by the RCMP, and specifically the RCMP in Nova Scotia, relating to cadaver dogs. So I understand that this is going to be very niche. I don't suppose this is going to be terribly popular. There's going to be, technical stuff, I guess, that not everybody's interested in. But it's relevant not only to Lilly and Jack's case, but also to any case in the future where cadaver dogs are used, because there'll be a lot of this information in here that is generalizable to cadaver dogs in general, the use of cadaver dogs in general. So I think it's a useful live stream to do, to go through this study, not just for Lilly and Jack's case, but for cases generally. So I don't mind reading this through. I've actually only skimmed it, so I'm happy to read it again and to fully digest it. Let's give people a couple of minutes, though, to come in and say a couple of hellos here. We've got Holly here to learn. We've got CW, Professor of Mathematics and Science, Aqua, Mike, Teresa, Elle, Lisa, Nicola, Alice, Layla, Donna, Kat, Leslie. Who else have we got? Dawn and Journey Takes a Trip. Just catching up with the live. I've literally only just started, so you don't have anything to catch up on. I've literally only just started. Not even started going through the research study yet. Hello, Ariel. And who else have we got in here? We've got Jana, Mary, Mildred, Shona, Debbie, and let's have a look. Osprey, Nikki. All right. So it's not going to take too long to go through this. It's 21 pages. However, like the last couple of pages are just the references. So as we go through, I'll explain as many of the terms as I can. It is fairly self-explanatory from what I've read so far, but I will explain any technical terms and also the nature of academic studies, because this was an academic study. This was an experimental piece of work. The authors are Natasha Dilke, who is from, if we go down here, the Nova Scotia Medical Examiner's Service, and then Brian Veniot, who is from the RCMP in Nova Scotia. And it was published in the Journal of Forensic Identification. So this is out there in the public domain, and much of what has been said in here is generalizable to the use of cadaver dogs in any case. So it's useful to know. All right, so we're going to start with the abstract. The abstract is an overall summary. All academic pieces of work have an abstract. It's so that you can just take a look at the first page and say, all right, let's look at the summary. Oh, yeah, this sounds like something I'd be interested in reading further. So I don't know why they just don't call it a summary. It's just standard practice to call it an abstract. Preliminary development and training began in 2015 to evaluate a human remains donation procurement and dog training program in the province of Nova Scotia with a specific Royal Canadian Mounted Police handler and dog team. Human remains were donated through the procurement program at the Nova Scotia Medical Examiner Service. The human remains specimens, so they were using actual human remains rather than like some trainers use artificial chemicals. So they're the same chemicals as is produced by the decomposition process of human remains, but they are made in a lab. So it's good that I don't know what the difference is, or if there is any difference, whether the dogs can tell any difference, I don't know. But it's good that for this experiment, they are using actual human remains. How far away can they smell remains? Sorry if a dumb question. It's not a dumb question, and it totally depends on the environment. It depends on where the remains are. Are the remains buried? Are the remains in water? What is, are they just in the open air? Are they in a closed container? There's all sorts of things that comes into that question. So it's not a dumb question at all, but it's impossible to answer because there's so many different circumstances in which human remains could be out there needed to be found. So it's not a dumb question at all. How long can they smell decomp outside? Again, it depends on what do you mean by outside. Do you mean out in the open air? Do you mean underground? Do you mean in water? What's the temperature like? How long has the person been dead? Has the person's body been moved? There's a whole bunch of things. So they're impossible to answer with one figure. Okay, where were we? All right, human remains were donated through the procurement programme at the Nova Scotia Medical Examiner Service. The human remains specimens were introduced to the human remains detection dog through scent box training, and that it explains what that is, and field searches. Specimens were categorised by method of concealment: above surface, so on the ground, underwater, buried, or hanging, which is interesting. It's interesting because dogs naturally put their noses to the ground because they're looking for prey. That's what they're doing when they're sniffing. They're looking for prey, and it's useful to have remains, to have the training, including remains that are hanging, because what if someone has done themselves in and they're hanging from rafters or hanging from a tree or hanging concealed somewhere? So that's useful. The team's ability to accurately detect the human remains specimens was evaluated under various weather conditions, search terrains, and varying stages of decomposition. A total of 266 training sessions were conducted during this initial development stage, of which 16 sessions resulted in false positive indications, demonstrating a training success of 94%. So that's good. Good rate of success. Other creators putting out false information regarding cadaver dogs was painful to watch. I haven't watched any. I haven't seen any. The last thing I watched on Lilly and Jack was the DT show from last night. I watched that this morning. So I'm very selective in what I watch. Okay, the introduction. So in academic papers, the introduction is the background. So this is very much generalizable to other cases. But an introduction goes from general information to specific. So you're writing, first of all, about the area of the study. What do we know so far about human remains detection dogs? What do we know so far about the collection of human remains and being used by human remains detection dog trainers? Those kind of things will be covered in the introduction. And then you go to, like towards the end of the introduction, is more specific, where you're saying what you're going to be doing in your study and why. So someone said a bear print was found by the boot print. Never heard that, Osprey. So I cannot confirm that. Never heard it. The development of a procedure to locate clandestine human remains is an important endeavour for the field of forensic science. However, human remains detection dog training protocol varies between different countries, agencies, and individual dog handler teams. That is very true. Training methods should be consolidated for implementation in specific countries, taking political, legislation and agency involvement into consideration in order to apply successful methodologies while maintaining regulations. I don't know that I agree with that, because there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to implement a training program. So that's my view, though. Okay, the foundation of human remains detection dog training can be standardized, and advanced training can be tailored to regional conditions involving environment, weather, and terrain searching variables. After the basic training of young dogs, several factors should be addressed to optimize accurate detection. Research suggests that the reward system for a dog should be toys, balls, or any positive activity that the dog would enjoy, but not food. Interesting. In puppy training or in general obedience training or trick training, using food as a reward is very common. If a dog is food motivated, not all dogs are food motivated, but in scent dog training, they do tend to use balls or some kind of toy, a tug toy, whatever the dog likes, their favorite toy. And they only get that toy when they're training. So it's not a toy that they can get bored with. You know, they got it all the time, so they, you know, they can play with it whenever they want. No, this particular toy is just for training. Like with Cassie, I use my hats because she's not allowed to pick up clothes. She's not allowed to have my hats in any other time other than when she finds them. So that's why you will see when Cassie finds a hat, she's allowed to pick it up and run around with it and play with it. And sometimes I play tug with her with it. That's her reward. Obviously, I can't do that when she's finding my phone, but it's the phone itself is the reward. For whatever reason, she just loves phones, for whatever reason. To diminish the potential of a false positive indication, positive reinforcement, patience, and an exuberant attitude have shown results in an overall better service dog. However, bad behavior should be corrected accordingly. Dogs are capable of recognizing, pointing, and general gestures by the handler. They absolutely are. I don't know of another species of animal that understands pointing. You know, when you point at something, a dog understands, like direction. They understand the pointing. They understand if you point in a certain direction to go in that direction. I'm not aware of other animals that understand human gestures like that. Where were we? So it's recommended that the location of training age remains unknown to the team. So to the handler. So both the dog and the handler, the team, because if the handler knows where the thing has been hidden, then the handler might unconsciously give the dog, like pointers, give the dog an indication, and the dog can be following the handler rather than actually following its nose. A horse can be taught to. Really? Okay, interesting. I don't know very much about horses. So I did riding lessons when I was a kid, but I'm kind of allergic to them. So there's that. I'm allergic to most animals, honestly. It's recommended that the dogs be trained to give the sit or lie down indication as opposed to barking. Some trainers don't mind. They'll allow the dog to use whatever indication it's most comfortable with. But certainly in explosives and drug detection, what you absolutely don't want is the dog to be really excited when it finds something and start pawing at it. Especially explosives. You don't want your dog pawing when there's a potential bomb. You just don't. So a nice passive indication, a sit or a lie down, then it means the dog isn't in any danger of pawing, getting overexcited, exuberant, jumping on the thing. You know, you don't want that. And you definitely don't want that in cadaver work either, like with a dead body, which may be a victim of crime. You don't want the dog to obviously mess with the crime scene. Forensic fieldwork can be highly stressful for all agencies involved, and a passive dog may be better suited for working alongside other forensic experts. Like a bouncy, exuberant dog might not be the best fit. Instrumental techniques for human remains detection have been researched as an alternative to dog searching, although instrumental methods such as molecule extraction and spectrometry analysis have advantages in precision, as they've been shown to lack in being able to compensate for changes in variables. I don't understand. I don't know what that is. Like molecule extraction and spectrometry analysis instead of cadaver dogs. I don't know what that is. I'd have to research that. Additionally, contemporary instrumental techniques are impractical for large area searches and for determining the highest concentration of deceased human scent. Oh, I guess what they mean is testing areas in the environment to see whether, let's say a body was once there. Like, obviously, if there's a body there, everybody can see there's a body there. But if a body's been there and then been moved, I guess they could test the earth, the soil, molecularly to see whether there is any human remains in that, in that area. I guess that's what that means. Seems very arduous if you're looking for someone who's missing, who's presumed dead, someone in water, someone who has, been murdered and probably buried or something like that. That seems incredibly impractical. At this time, detector dogs represent the fastest, most versatile method in the field of human remains detection. The capabilities of HRD dogs start with an understanding of scent mechanisms. So this is obviously relevant to any case. These general pointers are useful for any case. Whereas humans have approximately 5 million scent receptors in their nose, in their nasal area, German Shepherds have 225 million and Bloodhounds have 300 million receptors. I don't know about other breeds. I know German Shepherds have been tested and Bloodhounds have been tested. I guess German Shepherds because a lot of them are used in police work, in detection work, and then Bloodhounds because historically they've been judged to have the very best sense of smell of all dog breeds. I don't know of any other dog breeds that have been tested, though. Be interested to know, like across breeds, how different they are. I'm sure some other breeds have, but I'm not aware of the numbers. Research does not show a difference between dog breeds and accuracy of searches. Instead, temperament, agility, and the ability to keep focused are important aspects to consider when selecting individual dogs for training. That's true. All dogs, regardless of breed, have a great sense of smell. So you could teach any dog, as long as it was the right type of dog, as long as it was motivated to want to search, try and get Tilly motivated to search for anything other than pizza, you've got absolutely no chance whatsoever. She'd be very capable of it. She just doesn't want to do it. So you can't force a dog to do it if they don't want to. So you've got to start with a dog that's motivated to do it. Variables such as sex, age, and whether the dog has been neutered have not been shown to affect search outcomes. However, scenting capability can diminish with age. Research suggests that training detector dogs on more than one scent profile, so this is important, so cross-training, more than one scent, e.g. drugs, explosives, will not affect their work ethic. However, cross-training human remains detection dogs with live scent searching has shown negative results. That's true, but only in some circumstances. I read a paper recently about that if you train a dog on live scent and on human remains detection, in some circumstances, it doesn't matter. It makes them searching for one or the other no more negative, no more less accurate than single trained dogs. But in some circumstances, it does. Certainly in disaster zones, it does. In disaster zones, let's say in an earthquake, if you've got cross-trained dogs and you are searching for the living. Initially, in the initial stages, you're searching for the living, aren't you? You know, you want to rescue as many people as you can, but there are going to be dead people under the rubble in the, you know, that have been killed by that disaster. And a cross-trained dog is it's gonna alert on the dead people as well as the live people, but you don't want that. You want it only to detect at that time. You only want it to detect the live people because you want to rescue them first. You can go back later to attempt to, you know, get some of the dead out so that they can be returned to their families, if it's possible. You know, some disasters are not even possible, is it? But you want the dead first. You want the dead. Like you want the living first and then the dead. So a cross-trained dog is going to be confused. It's going to be less accurate, less useful. Scent searches that contain both living and dead human scents are more likely to cause confusion for the dog and could be detrimental in the field, especially searching for survivors in mass fatalities. That's what I've said. The duration and frequency of training can also impact performance. Dogs that have been trained once a week with multiple sessions per day had a higher acquisition rate compared to dogs that receive multiple training sessions on a daily basis. Interesting. They do need downtime. They do need some downtime, like training them constantly, day in, day out, day in, day out. They get bored, just like we do. You need rest days. You need consolidation of the learning, as we all do. Just wondering, did Catherine O'Sullivan get hold of me? No, but then again, I've not checked my emails for about, I don't know. I've not checked my emails for ages. So she could have emailed me and I've just not picked it up yet, but I will check. Have I seen the post about Callie Gibson in FB group? No, my FB group. Or any other FB group. I'm not going to go looking around FB groups just for that. Do you know if the dogs have been in action in Nova Scotia? Yes, they are on scene right now, today. They started on Monday. So the cadaver dogs are right there at the moment. Okay. However, dogs that are trained for one session on a daily basis have a higher success rate for indicating specimens. Interesting. Interesting. Like at the moment with Ella, now bear in mind Ella's only 9 weeks old and I'm introducing her to the smell of coins. We do it once a day for just a couple of minutes. We do about 4 repetitions every day just to get her familiar with the smell of coins. So that's interesting. It's interesting to know. Once the dog has learned a particular task or scent, it's most likely to remember that task for up to 4 weeks after the last training session. I would argue they'll remember it for a lot longer, but I think what they want in professional circumstances is maximum accuracy. I know that if I've not trained and done anything with Cassie for a while, she doesn't forget. She doesn't forget at all. But if I do the same thing with her for several days on a trot, she gets bored. She gets bored with it. She practically throws a hat at me. She's like, here you go. You lost it again. Here I go. I found it again. I'm bored with this. The handler should recognize when the dog is not performing optimally, is easily distracted, or failing to accomplish previously accomplished tasks. Like anybody, they have off days. They get bored. Physical activity can affect searches because dogs are incapable of fully scenting when they are panting. So if they're exhausted, if they're tired, you can't run these dogs like working for hours on end, especially when it's hot. You have to give them frequent rest. It's really hard work. Like sniffing, they're using literally like their entire brain is lit up. It's very arduous on them mentally. And then if you put in the physical activity that it takes, they need to have frequent rests. That's why just having 2 dogs on scene at the moment in Lilly and Jack's case is the bare minimum of what you would expect. That, you know, those dogs, they can't run all day, and the more exhausted they get, and like the physical act of panting, when they're panting, they can't be sniffing while they're panting. So you can be running your dog and the dog's not working to its optimal capacity because it's tired. Therefore, the handler and dog team should work on elongated training sessions and identifying exertion limitations during training rather than during an active field search. Also, this is something that obviously physical training is necessary, like having a fit dog is necessary in these cases. You can't have a really, you know, unfit dog doing this work because it's going to tire out really quickly. And different dogs have got different capacities for work. You know, if you think about a border collie, they can run easily 20 miles with minimal rest. Whereas, let's say a spaniel, like, they're probably equally energetic, but they are like they run in bursts. You know, they're not as good stamina wise as a border collie. And I'm using those as an example because I used to have a border collie, well, a border collie cross shepherd, and she could run for miles. Cassie is probably as active as Ginty was, but she's in bursts. She's in quick bursts, and then she has a rest, and then she bursts again and then has a rest. Cassie's more of a sprinter than a long distance runner, I guess you would say. But you know, you can do a generalization by breed like that, but individual dogs have got their own limits. So the handler should know their own dog, and all that should be worked out in training, not in the field, not when it actually matters. Okay, odor analysis. Scents are chemical signatures that are associated with particular chemical compounds, and disparities in scents are integral to both police scent lineups and the field of training. Each individual has a unique scent fingerprint, and the specific chemical compound associated with individuals can be observed from the abilities of tracking dogs. Even identical twins have got unique scent profiles. And of course, that's when we're talking about when they're alive. A dog can differentiate between identical twins. Additionally, fallout scent can be deposited on items without direct bodily contact and can be used to attribute items to specific individuals. As different volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, decompose the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins within remains, they contribute individually and in combination to scent changes. Accordingly, the outcome of scent fingerprint decomposition will vary between deceased individuals. So all human remains don't smell exactly the same. So somebody who is huge, like very, very overweight, let's say, into the super morbidly obese category where they've got a lot of body fat, to a dog, that will be a different scent than once they're dead and, you know, they're breaking down the amount of fat in that body. That's going to be different than somebody who is, let's say, small, skinny, and has got virtually no body fat. But we still want the dog to be able to find a person who's died regardless of their body type. So the training has got to take into account the fact that different humans smell different, both when they're alive, but also when they're deceased as well. We need to take that into account. Accordingly, the outcome of scent fingerprint decomposition will vary between deceased individuals. And I dare say some individuals who have died will be easier to find than others. There are hundreds of chemical compounds associated with decomposing human remains, with approximately 33 forming the foundation of the deceased human scent profile. These compounds include acids, alcohols, aldehydes, allergens, aromatic hydrocarbons, ketones, and sulfides. However, concentration of these compounds vary between individuals because of the decomposition environment, deposition environment, temperature, humidity, time of death, and body weight and size. So all human bodies break down into all of these, but there's probably different percentages of them, depending on the circumstance, the environment, all of the environmental things that might affect the way decomposition happens, but also the body weight and the body size of the person. Okay, an understanding of the difference between these deceased human scent and deceased animal scents need to be addressed, because we want a dog to be able to detect human remains regardless of where they are found in the environment, and also regardless of the actual human, you know, the compounds that they're breaking down into. But what we importantly want to be able to teach the dog to do is differentiate between human remains and then remains of other animals, like non-human animals. The chemical compounds that are present in human remains and animal remains are not the same. Specific compounds that are identified in human remains are present in different concentrations, yet may be completely absent in animal remains. So some of the compounds that humans break down into are not found in non-human animals. And I suppose it's likewise, you know, that there might be compounds in decomposing cows that are different than are found in decomposing pigs or decomposing mice. We won't be able to tell the difference. The scent of death, to me, it smells the same, whether it's a dead bird, a dead mouse, a dead dog, a dead cat, a dead rabbit. I found all of these things when I'm out, and I know I can smell it. I can smell it before I get to it. And I know something's died, but it all smells the same. But to a dog, they would be different because there's different compounds within those decomposing remains. Many agencies employ the use of deceased animal remains, such as pig, in lieu of human remains. Pigs are the closest to us in terms of the decomposition smell, because pigs have got a similar fat distribution, not necessarily distribution, but they have a lot of subcutaneous body fat like we do. So the scent is going to be more similar than a decomposing mouse or a decomposing bird. It's going to be more similar. But using pig remains as in lieu of human remains is not a good idea, because you don't want to teach your dog how to find dead pigs. You don't. You want them to find dead humans. You don't want to confuse them in that way. This produces an inaccurate representation of a scent profile that is associated with deceased human remains. Although there are chemical similarities between pig and human remains, the absence of specific compounds that are found in human remains but not in pig remains, or the presence of additional compounds that are found in pig remains but not in human remains, significantly narrows the dog's ability during active searches. Additionally, agencies may employ the use of manufactured chemical scents, pseudoscents, that mimic different stages of decomposition. Compared to the chemical compounds that are associated with human remains, like actual human remains, the use of pseudoscents depicts a limited odor profile. So you can buy, they're expensive, but you can buy odors that are manufactured in a lab, but are like, you can buy cadaverine, let's say. But yes, you're gonna find cadaverine in any human remains. You're gonna find the cadaverine, But it's just training a dog on cadaverine misses the whole gamut of the scents, the different compounds that they could be used to or trained on. Compared to the chemical compounds that are associated with human remains, the use of pseudoscents depicts a limited odor profile. The exact vox that the dogs associate with human remains are currently unknown. Like, we don't even know what the dogs are smelling. Like, what are the dogs attracted to? Thus, it's recommended that training agencies should employ a variety of human remains instead of solely relying on manufactured scent. I was going to train Cassie on human remains. Like, I could do it no problem, but I can only buy manufactured scent. And what's the point? It's usually expensive to do it. And what would be the point in it? In addition to understanding the chemical compounds that are associated with deceased human remains, soil chemistry and subsurface odor movement are important areas of research for training and specific geographic regions. The field of human remains detection must factor in the potential for human remains to be removed from a site. So if somebody's been murdered and then moved, well, we want to know that. We want to know that. We want a dog to be able to detect where remains have been, even if they've been removed, whether by human or animal means. And yeah, it could be that animals have moved them, and animals scavenged them. According to research involving comprehensive two-dimensional gas chromatography, I can't even say that word, chromatography, time of flight, mass spectrometry, decomposition-specific VOC profiles diminish within approximately 6 weeks. So if a body's been lying there somewhere and is moved, it's still detectable 6 weeks later. But in some circumstances, I would imagine that a body that has been moved would be detected a lot longer if there's active decomposition that's happened and the soil has basically soaked it in. I would imagine that if that's underground, that's not going to break down very quickly. So that's going to be there a lot longer than 6 weeks. However, hydrocarbons, the most persistent compound measured, remained in the soil at detectable levels up to 7 months after body removal. There you go. So some of the compounds may have been broken down and may have gone, but some of them are there. So this is another reason why you want your dog to be trained on the full gamut of what is produced during decomposition, rather than just cadaverine or putrescine or the others that you can buy. You want to train them on actual human remains, so that you know, if a body is moved, then and it's a long time since, at least some of that is still there that's detectable by the dog. If that makes sense in my head. Understanding the extent of decomposition fluid movement within the soil, as well as how chemical compounds react in the environment, will help the handler and training agency understand potential new search patterns and how to use the environment to their advantage. Underground movement can cause pooling of scent away from the original remains, especially when the ground is sloped. See, these things we don't even think about, do we? So if someone's died on a slope and then, they go into active decomposition and then the body's removed, either by a person, moving the body, or by an animal, well, actually, the dog might detect scent, but not in that original position, because the decomp has soaked into the soil, and with the movement, maybe it's rained, or it's moist under the soil, it's moved down. So a dog might detect, but not in the original place. Interesting. We don't think about these things, do we? Also, water is going to move scent around, obviously. Subsurface water channels have the potential of moving decomposition fluid and should be taken into consideration by handlers when field searches are being conducted. So if you're in a very watery area, all the more reason, you might have underground creeks or underground places where water pools. All that needs to be taken into account. It's a proper science, this. It's a proper science. Trigger warning, she said, moist. Yeah, some people don't like the word, do they? Oh, dear. Okay, HRD dogs have been recognised as reliable scientific tools in the field of human remains searching. There have been multiple studies into the scientific mechanisms of HRD dog training and testing of human remains that positively conclude that the dog and handler teams are capable of searching and positive indications using a variety of different remains in multiple environments. The full capabilities of service dogs are still not completely known, and success, which relies on the human factor for both the dog and the handler, can vary. Handler ability can vary. That's what that means. Development of country and region-specific training can assist in implementing standardized training protocols with the highest potential success rate of positive search results. Okay. All right, so we're getting now to the more specific information. So that's all the background. We're now going to find out what they did in this study, why they're doing this study, and what they did in this study. Let me have a drink. Oh, who's been blocked? Who's been blocked? What's IACS? I don't know what that is. It is a proper science. It absolutely is a proper science. There's a lot of, you've got to have an understanding of chemistry. You've got to have an understanding of geography. To be able to understand, obviously, your dog, to understand the best way to approach any particular search. Okay, the purpose of this program, so this experiment, was to evaluate a donated human remains procurement program in the province of Nova Scotia, Canada. The development of a human remains detection dog training program with a specific RCMP handler and dog team in conjunction with a literature review on odor analysis and scent training. So we've seen the literature review. They've done that. We've read that. Was conducted to determine the potential of the procurement program. Training results were assessed by testing the accuracy of the team's ability to detect donated human specimens given various weather conditions, search terrains, and varying degrees of decomposition, as well as analysing public opinion on the donation program. What's public opinion got to do with it? They don't get a say. The public don't get a say. Okay, materials and methods. So the method in an academic piece of writing in an experiment is what was done. It's the recipe. So in your method, it needs to be sufficiently detailed that somebody else could come along and replicate your study, because science should be replicable, should be able to replicate the study. So materials and methods, what they did, what the recipe for this experiment. The initial training and development stage of this program ran from April 25th until December 22nd, 2015. And the team consisted of one handler and one dog. In an experiment, we'd like to have used a lot of handlers and a lot of dogs. So we've got just one dog in this experiment. However, this one dog did a lot. I would have liked to have seen a bunch of dogs do it to be able to see whether some dogs were better in certain environments than others. And I'd like to have seen I'd like to see this study done again. It's a good study with what they've done, but I'd like to see it done on a bigger scale. Obviously, in Canada, they can't do it on a bigger scale because they have hardly any dogs. The dog handler had been specialised dog handler since 2005 and acquired a police service dog named Doc in 2011. Doc was the first imprinted on explosives profiles in 2012 and was certified on human remains detection in July 2015 from an accredited agency working with the Manitoba Fire Marshal's Office. All training sessions were recorded as a requirement for RCMP dog training and included the following variables. So what was recorded? The date, the time, the description of specimens, the environment, so temperature, weather and wind speed, length of training session and additional notes if required. The Human Remains Donation and Procurement Programme received its first specimen on July 22nd, 2015. All specimens procured through this programme are referred to as MOU specimens. What does that stand for? Okay, I don't know what that stands for. Not to worry. Whereas non-MOU training aids refer to specimens obtained through legal teaching establishments or other institutions. Okay. The specimens. So this is the human remains that were used. A formal consent process was developed by the Nova Scotia Medical Examiners Service and was used by coordinators of investigations in their approach to families who might wish to donate to the programme. Look, I'd love my body when I die to be donated to dogs. You know, you can use as many of my body parts as you want in a training programme. You can just feed me to hungry dogs. I don't mind. You know, just take me to the RSPCA shelter and chop me up and feed me to the dogs. I don't care when I'm dead, but that's good to know. Okay, so the coordinators of investigations were within the Medical Examiners Service work closely with families during the investigation of a sudden death. When a donor family has been identified, the COI explained the programme and answered any questions they had before confirming donation consent. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall to that conversation. All right, so your family members died. Sorry for your loss. Now, we've got this dog training programme. We want to donate your family member to the dogs. Look, I would say that there are some times when somebody dies and you want their organs to be donated, but you've not got perfect conditions for them to be donated. Like when my son died, when my son was killed, it was a road traffic collision. So we weren't allowed to donate his organs because he'd been basically splattered on the road. So they couldn't use any of his organs. And that was such a shame that they couldn't use any of his organs. But if we'd had a program like this, I would have said, yeah, but can you use him for the dog training? You know, because it's not like the organ has to be, you know, intact and not with road rash on it and, you know, stuff like that. So, yeah, I'd have loved that. I'd have loved that. I really would. And so would he, because he loved dogs. Okay, when a donor family had been identified, they explained the programme and answered any questions before confirming donation consent. The amounts of each specimen did not exceed the size of a small closed fist and were removed accordingly to what was requested for training and what was the consenting programme process allowed to be removed. In the initial training development stages, specimens were collected and stored separately. The specimens were stored in individual sealed plastic labelled containers in a 7-degree Celsius specimen refrigerator I don't know what 7C is in Fahrenheit for those in the US, but like a normal fridge, I would guess, with an inventory of information, including the identification of the specimen, physical state of the remains, and the description and amount procured. To use, the specimens were transferred to a 7-inch PVC tube with air holes for training. Specimens were signed out of the inventory to the RCMP dog handler, whose responsibility it was to maintain and secure them. They were transported to the training site in a biohazard airtight cooler and signed back into the medical examiner's service at the completion of training. So the trainer's walking about with like little test tubes in biohazard bags. 44 Fahrenheit. Thank you, Mary. Medical grade gloves were worn at all times and were replaced in between handling different specimens. All right, so that's the specimens. Now we're going to learn about the type of training that was done. So they use scent boxes. This is very common for all different types of article detection training. They use scent boxes. So it explains what they are. The first stage of training involved introducing the dog to a target human scent. Scent boxes, so 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters by 15 centimeters. So that's 12 inches by 12 inches by 6 inches. So 12 inches high, 12 inch wide, and then a depth of 6 inches. That were constructed of plywood. They were used during the initial training stage. At the top of the scent box, a 10 centimeter diameter hole had been cut out of the wood. 5 of these identical scent boxes were lined up on the ground with a minimum of 3 feet between each box. The target human remains were placed in the box located in the middle of the line, and additional non-target scents, e.g. clothing and tools, were placed in the remaining 4 boxes. So the dog can't see inside the box. The dog can't, use its eyes. It's a closed box, but it's got holes so the scent can get out. Because a dog can't scent anything if it doesn't get to the dog's nose. So the handler began training on one end of the scent box line with the dog kept on a leash and focused before beginning of the approach of the line. The handler would issue the command, search bone, and start the approach to the first scent box in the line. The dog continued down the line, scenting each box in succession. When the handler and dog reached the middle box containing the target human remains scent, the down command was issued as the positive indication for the target human remains. So you're teaching the dog to go down, to lie down when it gets to the one with the scent in, the scent that they want them to find. When the dog positively indicated, he was rewarded with a ball and verbal or physical praise. This process was repeated starting from the opposite end of the scent box line. The positions of all the boxes were eventually changed, and the training process was repeated until the dog was able to detect the scent without being prompted. So they mix the boxes up. They always keep the scent in the same box, so you're not cross-contaminating the boxes, but you basically mix the boxes up out of the vision of the dog, obviously. So in some sessions, the scent that you want them to find is in the end. Sometimes it's in the middle. Sometimes it's the second one. They'll move the boxes around. All right. So the dog isn't just learning to go to the middle box. And you want them to positively indicate by lying down. Off-leash training was conducted following the successful initial training. The position of the scent boxes were changed while maintaining a minimum 3-foot distance between each box. The target human remains box was kept unknown to the handler. Upon completion of this stage, and that's important because you don't want the handler to know, because the handler might subconsciously communicate that to the dog somehow. Upon completion of this stage, all items were removed from the scent boxes, and those containing secondary scents, e.g. burnt items, were retired from training purposes. Single and multiple specimen field training. Interesting. The second stage of training involved field training in different environments. So we're now going out into the real world. So we've trained the dog using boxes, that probably indoors or in a training field or a barn or something. and the dog can reliably indicate when the scent that you want them to find, but by using a positive indication, it's reliable at that. Now it's time to go out into the field and be more challenging. So the second stage of training involved field training in different environments, weather conditions, training scenarios, and implementing different human remains training specimens. The human remains specimens were removed from the airtight containers at the medical examiner's office and placed in a 7-inch PVC tube. The PVC tubes consisted of removable caps at both ends, 7 drill holes on the long side of the tube, and contact information for the RCMP. Only one specimen was placed in a single tube for training purposes during the preliminary training phase, and gloves were changed between handling new specimens. All specimens were transported to the training field location in an airtight biohazard cooler. The specimens were characterized into types of hides: above surface, so on the ground, buried, hanging, and water. The specimens were deposited approximately 24 hours before training in an attempt to remove additional scent variables. So the scent of the gloves, for example, you're handling them with gloves. Well, there's going to be some residual smell of the gloves on those tubes. So they're going out. So somebody, not the handler, but some person is going out hiding these tubes around and about 24 hours before the training session. Above surface hides referred to above ground placement of the training specimen. The PVC tube was placed on the ground of an open field, wooded area, or gravel lot. So even, out in the open, you've got different environments. So an open field, wooded area, gravel lot. The handler gave the command, search bone, and the dog began the initial cursory search of the terrain. Doesn't say how big the area is. Be interesting to know how big the area is that they're using. So when the dog discovered the above surface hide, he indicated the hide and he was rewarded for a positive indication. When the dog located and indicated on one of the multiple specimen hides, a reward was given, removed, and the command to search bone was given again. So there's more than one that they've got to find. Have the dogs been on the property yet? Yes, apparently so. Apparently so. Buried hides include scenarios where the specimen was obstructed in some manner. A hole was dug and the PVC tube was placed at the bottom. The measurement of depth from the bottom of the hole was recorded before covering the PVC tube with the existing soil or sod. Searches were identical to above surface training. Approximately 24 hours after specimen deposition, the handler commanded the dog to search bone. When the dog located the buried PVC tube and a positive indication was given, he was rewarded. Multiple negative holes were also dug to ensure the dog was searching and positively indicating on the human remains scent profile, not potential soil disturbance. So it's pretty thorough. It's a shame it was only one dog, but it's pretty thorough. Procedures for searching and indicating on water hides were identical to buried hides and did not exceed a depth of 8 inches in standing water during this preliminary training phase. So they're not chucking these things out into the ocean and expecting the dog to find it. They're using shallow water because this is obviously just the initial training. Hides that were positioned off ground were classified as hanging. For hanging hides, the handler directed the dog to look up. The dog actively raised himself on his back legs with his front legs on a tree trunk or object while scenting upwards or sniffing upwards, like Cassie does when Cassie wants, right? Walking along in the field. Cassie's behind me. And I see her, I turn around, right, to just look where she is. And she's jumping down from a tree with a bird in her mouth. So literally, she's seen a bird up in the tree. She's climbed the tree and grabbed the bird. The bird probably thought, oh, I'm safe up here. because never before has a dog climbed a tree to like grab a bird. It's like crazy. Dear God. All right, alternate training. Another training variable involved the length of time that had passed once the specimen had been hidden. During a single and multiple specimen training, the handler hid a specimen and allowed a certain amount of time to pass before introducing the dog. The length of time that passed between when the specimen had been hidden and when the dog was being trained varied from 24 hours to 19 days. The procedure for training on specimens that had been hidden for an extended length of time was identical to single and multiple specimen training. In the field, the handler buried the specimen. So the handler's doing it. A separate person. Buried the specimens and marked the area with fluorescent orange flagging tape. And on the day of training, the handler brought the dog out onto the training field and conducted a search of the area. The final training variable undertaken at this stage of the project was contaminated bucket training. Interesting. The procedures for training were identical to the scent box training. So soil was harvested from an empty field and represented typical Nova Scotia soil, consisting of a loam or clay mixture with small stones. The soil was separated into 6 different 30-inch long PVC tubes with caps at both ends. Human remains specimens were placed in 2 of the 6 tubes. The other 4 remained uncontaminated. After 39 days, both human remains specimens were removed from the tubes. Wow. The contaminated bucket training consisted of 3 clean 4-litre buckets labelled with a permanent marker, control, and contaminated. The soil from the PVC tubes containing 1 set of human remains were emptied into the bucket labelled contaminated. 2 of the PVC tubes contained non-contaminated soil were emptied into the remaining control buckets. For training, the buckets were placed in a line 3 feet apart, and the dog was directed to scent each bucket. After a positive indication, the dog was rewarded and removed from the area, while the buckets were repositioned for further training sessions. Following the training sessions, and the airtight lids were replaced on the respective buckets and returned to the storage area in the corner of the outdoor courtyard of the medical examiner's office. So that is what was done. That was how it was done. What were the results? What could this dog do? So the results of all of this training, how successful was this dog at all of these different training protocols? So this is the results section. Successful scent box training resulted in positive indications on the target human scent, as well as the dog actively listening to commands and holding an indication until rewarded. So remember, the scent box training was just the first step, just introducing the dog to the scent. Single and multiple search training followed the scent box training phase, and the different types of specimens that were used are included in figures 1 and 2. Next page. Prior to the acceptance of the Human Remains Procurement Programme, non-MU specimens were used for training. Those specimens represented common training aids that were procured for dog training in Canada and included human teeth, bone, and placenta. When the procurement program was accepted, specimens were obtained for training. The non-MU specimens, except human teeth, were retired. Shall I don't know you lost your son? Oh yeah, 2014, long time ago. Okay, so figure 1, non-MU specimens used in training. So this is placenta. Placenta A, placenta B, placenta C. So I assume that's 2 different placentas. So look here. What were we doing? Single and multiple training. Okay, so this is the number of different training sessions. And then we've got ribs, vertebra, so spine bones, hair, soil, Does that say? What does that? Does that say soil? Long bone, clavicle, collarbone, patella, the knee, teeth, and blood. Well, human teeth would be easy to get, wouldn't they? You know, you just, when your kid loses a tooth, they need to just like call the tooth fairy. Or did the teeth have to come from? I suppose the teeth would have to come from a dead person, wouldn't they? Rather than a kid who's, you know, sent their tooth to the tooth fairy. It did say soil. Weird. Okay, so what's this? Figure 2. Mew specimens. Okay, so these are the different specimens. So this is what they got from families. So from the medical examiner approaching families of dead people. So they got livers, ribs, brains, blood, skin, and muscle from 4 different donors. So donor 3, what was that? So skin was from 2 donors, donor 2 and donor 4. And then the others either donated 2 or 3 different pieces of body. Okay. Training sessions for this project were conducted in many different types of environments, including woods, open fields, grass, gravel pits, soil or clay, water, garages, and vehicles. Warehouse buildings, which were all recorded during training. I'd love to see those recordings. I'd love to see it. They need to like make a whole YouTube channel with the training on. Love to see it. Other additional environmental factors recorded during training sessions included the amount of time the dog searched, weather variables, temperature, and wind. An analysis of wind variables in conjunction with temperature can be found in Table 1. Wind speeds were documented using the Beaufort scale for a qualitative analysis of this environmental variable. So the Beaufort scale, like how windy it is. You know, it's like breezy, strong breeze, gale, hurricane, you know, that's kind of scale. The type of training hides was another important variable that was recorded during training. These consisted of above surface, buried, hanging, and water. The number of hides for each category in conjunction with the number of negatives or false positive indications that were given for each hide can be found in Table 2. The results for the percentage of positive indications for each category or hide is also stated. There were 266 training sessions. The total number of negative or false positive indication was 16. That's overall. So that's pretty good, isn't it? So 266 sessions, the dog was wrong 16 times. I am a tough northern lassie, yeah. So that's pretty good. Like the dog was wrong sometimes, but most of the time, the dog was right 250 times. The dog was right 250 times, wrong on 16. That's pretty good going. With the highest number of wrong choices belonging to buried remains training scenarios. Above surface training searches resulted in positive indications of 95.8% of training searches. Buried hides resulted in 91.6 positive indications. That's percentages. And then the total percentage overall across all conditions was 94%. That's pretty good. So it's easier for a dog to detect remains that are on the ground rather than buried. That makes sense, doesn't it? That it's going to be slightly less good when it's buried. And remember, these are tubes. These are tubes of you know, little pieces. It's not a whole body. This is little tubes that this dog's got to find. So imagine if it was a whole body. I think it would be pretty easy, you know, compared to a tube. I would imagine it's easier to find a whole body than it is to find the scent from a little tube. I don't know about you, but I don't suppose they could do that experiment, could they? You know, they can't like murder 266 people and hide them out in different areas, can they? And then get the dog to find them. They can't do that. But I would just guess, I would just speculate that if the 266 training sessions were complete bodies rather than little pieces, yeah, Harold Shipman could. Yeah, his victims were around that number, weren't they? Like, oh, just over 200. So yeah, Harold Shipman. Yeah, he could have. One of our most prolific serial killers here in the UK, for those who don't know who Dr. Harold Shipman was. Dear God. And he did himself in prison, so when he was on remand, so we didn't even get the comfort of seeing him on trial, because he did himself in beforehand. But yeah, 200 and odd that we know about. So there was most probably more, I would think. And he almost got away with it. He got away with it for a long time. Okay, so overall, the total percentage correct answers was 94%. If it was an exam, I'd be very, very happy with that number, like correct 94% of the time. The contaminated bucket experiment yielded some interesting observations. Each day consisted of 3 training searches, which all resulted in police service dog Doc giving positive indications. From the date of soil contamination to the final training session, a total of 81 days had passed. So he was right 100% of the time in the contaminated bucket experiment. Isn't that fantastic? So when they contaminated the soil with human remains, Doc was right 100% of the time. Now that's more realistic, isn't it? Than having, a piece of liver or something in a tube. Is that Dr. Death? Yes. Dr. Harold Shipman. I did a video about Harold Shipman. He was one of my very first videos on this channel. I did one video on Harold Shipman. I don't even know whether I've still got it on the channel. I took some of my really early videos down. Like, they're still there, they're just privated. Yeah, the body farm at the University of Tennessee. Yeah, you can donate your body to the body farm, can't you? You should cover Harold's case again, especially childhood. There's loads of information about his childhood. Oh, there's a body farm at Quantico, Virginia as well. I would expect there was, because that's the FBI training center, isn't it? All right, so these were the different wind speeds when they were out in the field. So we've got wind speed, light, moderate, high, or none. No wind. So light wind in 117 training sessions, moderate in 95, high winds in 13, and none in 7. And then temperature, so average search training time in minutes. So high temperature, low temperature. So it took him 8 minutes in high temperature in light winds. This is just an average across 117 sessions. 8 minutes in moderate wind, 95 sessions. 8 minutes. So when it's higher wind or no wind, I don't think there'd be a statistically significant difference between all of that. So around 8 minutes. When temperature's high, regardless of wind condition, he's finding stuff in about 8 minutes, just over 8 minutes. When the temperature's low, it takes him a bit longer. So 11 minutes, 13 minutes. And then presumably there was no really low temperature when it was high or no wind. So high is classified as 12 degrees C or above. So that's about, 50 something Fahrenheit, is it? A low is 11 CA or below. Remember, this training was done over the summer, though. Actually, no, because they started it in April and ended it in December. So, yes, the latter end of that training would have been when it was cold. Interesting. So, average search times for different wind speeds and temperature variables. Okay, so this is the number of searches he did and the number of negative indications. So, when he got it wrong, basically. So, above surface, number of field searches 143, got it wrong 6 times. So 95.8% correct. Buried, he did 108 searches, got 9 wrong, 91.6%. Hanging, did 13, got none wrong, 100%. And then water, they only did 2. And remember, they only did it in very shallow water. And he was only 50% on the water. So, but he only did 2 sessions. So if he did more sessions, then he probably would have got better. So water searches are incredibly difficult. They are very, very difficult, and not all dogs are good at them. Not all dogs are trained on them either. And you have to be right over the target to get it. And some dogs don't like water. Some dogs do not like working in water. But where, it was non-water, it was fantastic. I don't suppose they included water in the overall results because they only did 2. It's like unreliable. They only did 2. So where it was non-water, I think that was where the 94 overall percent comes from, I would imagine. And then we've got a percentage of correct indications by number of field searches categorized by type of hide. So we've got, that's the date, the training date. So that would be when it was hidden, I'm guessing. So they hid them all. I assume that's when they hid them, I'm guessing. So we've got remains in soil, training sessions 3. Yep, indicated on them. Remains in soil, 3 sessions, yep. Remains removed from soil, still was able to indicate. Remains removed from soil, was able to indicate. Remains removed from soil, was able to indicate. And that was buried in September, and the training was done in December. With remains removed. 3 sessions, got them all right. So contaminated soil training indications. Here remains placed in soil on the 14th of the 9th, 2015, and removed from the soil on 22nd of the 10th. So removed in October. So when it was removed in October, and this last one, he still was able to indicate and get 100% when it was 2 months down the line. So that's pretty good, isn't it? And remember, these are only small pieces of flesh or pieces of bone or pieces of liver or pieces of teeth. You're not talking about a whole body. You're talking about a very small piece that he has to find in a field or in a bucket. So it's pretty good going. All right, discussion. So this is the results discussed in relation to what we know already and in relation to the practical side of it all and maybe what needs to be done in future. You don't necessarily have to cover all of that in your discussion section, but That's the type of thing you tend to see in the discussion. All right, so human remains procurement program. The success of the human remains detection dog training program required multi-agency cooperation from the implementation of the program, a memorandum of understanding to the everyday interactions and collaboration between the RCMP dog handler and the medical examiner's office. Cooperation of research interests and results were important factors in producing a successful program. The implementation of this program was unique to the province of Nova Scotia and the first of its kind in Canada. The procurement procedures could be considered as a standard for nationwide adaptation. Be interesting to see whether this was adapted to different areas in Canada, whether this was used in future. I've never heard of it here in the UK. Donating, you can donate your body to science. You can donate your body to medical research, that kind of thing. But I've never heard of being able to donate your body to dog training. Never heard of it. I don't think we have it. I'm sure I would have known about it if we had that, because I'd love to do that. I don't want to donate my body to science because bits of my body will just sit in some kind of cooler forever while different researchers argue about how they're going to use them. Believe me, I worked in research for over 20 years. Believe me, about the amount of apathy and the amount of nonsense that goes on, office politics and all of that crap. So that put me completely off donating my body to medical science. I used to want to do that until I started working in research, and then I realized just how rubbish people were, and my faith in humanity, even at the educated section of humanity, disintegrated to the point where I'm no longer going to donate my body to medical science. But I would like to donate my body to dog training. I think that would be useful, but I don't think we have it here. The procurement procedures could be considered standard. All right, we've read that. The formal consent forms were developed using templates from the Legacy of Life program, which included the provincial organ and tissue donation regulations. The memorandum of understanding was accepted by the provincial government Minister of Justice as a collaborative project between the Medical Examiner's Office and RCMP for the retrieval of donated human remains. Specimens for procurement were determined through discourse between the RCMP handler and forensic pathologists with the Medical Examiner's Office. A formal consent procedure had to be developed by the Medical Examiner's Office that would be used by investigators in their approach to families who might wish to donate to the program. The medical examiner's consent process has several variations that reflected the different characteristics of the program in comparison to other donation programs. This process ensured that families would know exactly what the donated remains were being used for in the program. The coordinators of investigations with the Medical Examiner's Service were frontline investigators who worked closely with families during the investigation of a sudden death. That close relationship gives the people the insight to decide which families may be the most appropriate to approach for donation to the program. When consent had been obtained, the forensic pathologist would review the details of the case and the consent before retrieval occurred. Deciding which families to approach included liaising between the RCMP dog handler and the coordinators of investigation to ascertain training needs. The goal of this program was to provide the team with as many various types of training specimens as possible in an attempt to standardize procurement methods. This ongoing collaboration with the dog handler and the coordinators, is essential for human remains procurement program to be effective as possible. Could they not get them from jails? Well, no, because inmates do have families who presumably want them back. Maybe some of them, maybe not all of them. It's not possible to have an urn at home here. You need to bury it or spread it with strict rules. Oh, I've got a dead person in my house. I've got some cremains in my house. I've got cremains of a human and I've got cremains of 3 dogs in my house. Scent box training. I've only got the cremains of a human because I don't know what to do with them. So there's that. The scent box training was the first stage of training, as we've seen, for the dog to be taught to locate and indicate on the target deceased human scent amongst with other non-human scent boxes. Several important factors were addressed at this stage in order to build a strong foundation for the human remains detection training. Repetitive procedures such as the dog sitting and focusing before training begun were necessary for a successful session. On-leash training allowed the dog to listen to the commands of the handler and to be carefully directed to each scent box one at a time. When the target scent box had been reached and the dog had scented the human remains, the handler needed to issue the command for the dog's indication. The indication itself should be obvious to either a sit or a lie-down position, and the dog needed to hold that indication until the reward was given, no matter how much time had passed. The reward was not only used as a positive reinforcement when the dog indicated on the target scent, it was also the signal that the training had been paused. The reward did not signal an end to the search, it was just a brief rest period that would end once the ball was taken back. The second stage of scent box training involved off-leash training and consisted of the same procedures as the on-leash training. Positions of all the scent boxes were changed every training session, not just the target human remains. Dogs have a tendency to return to the box that resulted in the reward. Of course they do. So it was important to discourage this behaviour, but also not to punish the dog for a false indication, because this is only the initial stages. This is the dog learning, so you're not going to punish, and you're not going to take this into account either in your results, because this is the dog actually learning which scent that they need to actually indicate to. So they're going to get it wrong at first, and then, you know, then they get reliable, and once they get reliable, that's when they went out into the field and started to actually, you know, count the amount of times that he got it right and wrong. Responses that might be encountered in a search setting. Developing this foundation between handler and the dog is important for maintaining communication and solidifying reliability. Okay. Single specimen field training was introduced following a successful scent box training. The single specimen field search allowed the handler to fully control the search pattern and to observe the dog while he was working. But having only one specimen to focus on, minor details such as the dog's concentration, pattern searching, and adapting to external distractions could be observed and corrected. Single specimen field training was continually used regardless of how many times a particular specimen had been used previously, whereas single specimen training introduced the dog to a multitude of specimens. Multiple specimen training developed specific searching methods. During this stage of training, the handler and the dog team were encouraged to test training boundaries, specifically observing performance over longer periods of time during training and in a variety of different environments. The transportation, handling, and hiding of the human remains specimens meant that a method needed to be used to protect the remains but still allow scent to escape. PVC tubes provide a durable and portable container for transporting and training, and were designed to keep small animals from interfering with the remains, as well as containing all necessary emergency contact information. Yeah, if somebody comes along and finds it, finds a test tube, finds a tube like on a field, and you like freak out. You think you've got the weirdest serial killer in the world. So you don't want somebody to come along and find it. You're like hidden for like 24 hours or whatever. The purpose of training in a multitude of environments was to replicate death scenes that might be encountered. Multiple specimen field training represented scattered remains, mass disaster scenes, or evidence leading to a death scene. By training on multiple specimens, the dog was taught that he must stay focused even after receiving a reward for a positive indication. You know, that once you get your reward, it's not over. You might have to do it again. You know, like in a disaster, you might have to find one person and then go out and find another person. You know, Training scenarios were decided based on the length of time since the dog had completed a specific type of training, the weather and the wind conditions that day, and what type of terrain was being used. Having success in ideal conditions was the foundation for continuing training in conditions that would be challenging the dog and handler. Pushing boundaries in terms of environment, weather, and terrain provided useful information on what might be expected in the field for the dog and the handler. Research suggests that low temperatures in conjunction with high or no wind would result in longer or more difficult training scenarios. Both light and moderate wind depicted a shorter average search time training. So we saw that, didn't we, in that table, for temperatures of 12 degrees C or above. And 12 degrees C isn't hot, is it? It's only like lukewarm, really, in comparison to temperatures 11 C or below. Results for high or no wind training sessions also suggest shorter search times for higher temperatures. However, more data needs to be procured and analysed for these variables. Remember, there was only one dog. So I would have liked to have seen whether the pattern of this was consistent across different dogs. Light to moderate wind was classified as the ideal environment for the dog to pick up scent and search for the human remains. The movement of scent was an important, I talk about this a lot in my videos. Whenever I talk about search dogs, I talk about this a lot, about the wind and how wind moves scent. The direction of the wind and just the movement of the wind moves scent. The movement of scent was an important factor for the handler to take into the consideration. Specifically, wind speed and direction of the wind should be analysed prior to beginning a search and should be monitored during the search for changing conditions. Higher temperatures aid in the release of the scent from the ground to form the scent cone. The scent cone is then distributed by the wind, in which the dog should identify and proceed to locate the highest concentration of the scent. Lower temperatures make it difficult for scent to be released and rise above the ground, making searches longer and potentially more difficult. Searches should be conducted in different types of environments, but the state of the dog should be observed to make sure it's working to the highest of its abilities, not like really exhausted and tired and that. Types of training hides were an important variable and consisted of above surface, buried, hanging, and water hides. The hides represented real-life scenarios where the dog might be required to search while taking human variables into consideration. Hides were positioned in many scenarios according to examples from past scenes or through the psychological understanding of human behaviour, e.g. bodies hidden by criminals, lost hikers, or suicides. Above surface hides were classified as hides that were not obstructed either intentionally or unintentionally. These types of hides represent several situations. A body might have been left above ground, like somebody dumped. A terminal event might have occurred in a secluded area, so somebody going for a hike and has a medical emergency and dies, and then people want to find them, resulting in above ground death. Or there may be scattered remains from animal scavenging, so you might find body parts in different areas. In terms of searching, the dog would normally discover the hide and indicates after the initial cursory search. The handler assisted the dog in the search by directing him into the wind in order to find the scent. And once the dog had discovered the scent, he would pinpoint the hide and indicate. Above surface hides were the simplest field training exercises and were regularly used in the training. So you want to give the dog a lot of easy wins to start with. Buried hides were used in training to represent clandestine burials of human remains, like murder, burying a body. In order to cover the multitude of terrain variables, buried hides were located in different types of soils, including clay, sand, gravel, and under forest debris. I'd like to have known how successful the dog was in each one of these, like the results weren't split into these different types. Because of the logistics of training on water highs, not many of them were attempted at this initial training and development stage, except to see whether the dog was capable of indicating on specimens located underwater. And he was 50%. He got one, didn't get the other. These hides were identical to buried hides, except for the fact that they were located in shallow pools of water. In instances where the dog could not indicate in direct relation to the hide, he was trained to indicate as close to the source of the scent as physically possible. Interesting. After his indication, he was encouraged to direct the handler to the hide in order to reaffirm that he knew what it was he was being rewarded for. Hanging hides were the last type to be studied and were not necessarily restricted to suicide victims or accidents, but also included training scenarios where blood evidence was located off the ground in some manner in a tree or atop of a large rock. Interesting. Hanging hides were not only encouraged the dog to be aware what might be located above his head, but also encouraged the handler to be vigilant for evidence not located on the ground. Hanging hides were slightly more difficult for the dog to get close to. Once a hide was discovered, he would indicate at the base of a tree, rock, or other object where the hide was located. Multiple specimen searches used one type of hide, e.g. above surface hides, or many different hides, e.g. a buried specimen, above surface hides, hanging hides. This training was more complicated for the handler and dog team. Multiple specimen field training was integral to understanding how far both the handler and the dog could go in terms of physical activity, concentration, and scenting ability. Longer searches tested the endurance level of the handler and dog team, but were essential for building strength for multiple specimen field searches or large area searches. The number, I think that's why searchers missed the piece of blanket. They were looking at the ground. It's definitely why they missed Tyler, what's his name? Oh, God. Tyler Goodrich. Tyler Goodrich had been missing for over a year, and he was found hanging in a tree in an area close to a road that had been searched multiple times, and he'd hung himself in a tree, and no one bothered or realized to look up. So that's how difficult it is. Whereas all hanging hides received positive indications, 1 out of the 2 water searches was negative. These results are a good beginning point for future analysis. In total, the percentage of positive indications during training correlates to approximately 94% and can represent the validity of both the dog as well as the success of the donation and training program. Alternate training. This is probably my favorite, the contaminated bucket training. The procedure for the contaminated bucket training was similar to the scent box training in that it was directed training. The handler kept the dog focused on the task and insisted on fully scenting a bucket before moving on to the next one. The dog was encouraged to make contact with the soil, and by disturbing the soil to some extent, odor was released, allowing the dog to fully scent during each search. The purpose of this experiment was to determine the dog's ability to scent and positively indicate on a specimen that had been removed from the soil after a long period of time. The deposition of all 3 buckets controlled multiple variables. The airtight lids on the buckets kept out environmental elements and animals while containing the microenvironments inside the bucket. The particular experiment was not necessarily representative of what might occur in the field training scenario. However, results of this experiment show that police service Doc was capable of scenting and indicating on remains that are being removed from soil after an extended period of time. They didn't bring dogs in for Tyler then. They probably did. I don't know whether they took dogs to that particular area. but they'd search that area again and again. It was only about 900 yards, I think, from his home, like near a road. It was so weird that they didn't find him, but he'd been hanging there that whole time. Additional alternate training had been conducted over time, varied between 24 hours and 19 days. The specimens used in overtime training and used in field searching only once because the specimens used in overtime training were used in field searching only once because it would be simple for the dog to recognize an environment and return to that exact placement of the previous hide from memory. The dog was capable of correctly scenting and indicating on hidden specimens after the longest amount of time, 19 days. There was no correlation between longer or shorter search times or passage of time. Some hides that were deposited after 24 hours took approximately 15 minutes for the dog to scent and positively indicate on, where the longest overtime hide at 19 days took only 4 minutes. Variables such as weather, temperature, and wind speed attributed to the successful searches and positive indications, suggesting that searching under ideal environmental conditions allowed the dog to the highest potential for success. That stands to reason, doesn't it? One of the variables for field training involves how much time had passed since the specimen had been hidden. Hides consisting of human bones seem to be the most challenging for the dog to scent and positively indicate on. And we normally think bones would be easy for a dog to find, but they're not, because bones are dry, aren't they? Bones are dry. The amount of human bone that was used in a training specimen was small in size and could represent the limit for the dog to be capable of searching and positively indicating on. Another factor could be the changes in the profile of the compounds in the specimen that was deposited in the surrounding environment. The chemical composition of any specimen was continually challenged by the passing of time and other applied variables, temperature, relative humidity, and environment. The profiles from human bone as they relate to specific Nova Scotia environments are currently unknown and beyond the scope of this preliminary research. Conclusion, we're nearly there. The Human Remains Detection Dog Training and Procurement Programme is a valid endeavour that is capable of being adopted on a national level by like-minded agencies. Because of the scope of this research project, training, analysis, and expansion are all continuous and ongoing. There are several additional projects that may be developed for field training in the future, including fire and water training, inclusion and testing of additional handler and dog teams, yes please, and further research into the scent of human decomposition. Utilizing human remains as a training aid results in positive, well-rounded and accurate training scenarios. For further information, contact that person. Well, I'm very disappointed because this was very promising. You know, the fact that they only use one dog, you know, would lead me to believe that this is the preliminary research, and what they're going to do is, you know, this was very successful. You know, police dog doc was correct 94% of the time. And it doesn't appear that Canada have done very much with this. Like, there's no dogs currently in Nova Scotia that are human remains detection dogs, despite this first experiment being done in Nova Scotia. And they only have between 6 and 8 cadaver dogs in the entirety of Canada today. And this experiment was done in 2015, published in 2017, published in the Journal of Forensic Identification in 2017, but it's seemingly never followed up on. How disappointing, because this was really promising. Got a really promising training program. The dog was very successful, so clearly the training was successful. They got the right dog for the job. They published it in an academic journal. So, you know, these two people, Natasha Dilkey and Brian Veniot, had bothered to write it and send it in for publication. And nothing seemingly has happened, because now they've not progressed. They've only got between 6 and 8 human remains detection dogs in the entirety of Canada. Such a shame. Such a shame. Wonder if Canada can have them trained from US and brought over. They've got a really good training program. They've got a really good training center. They breed their own dogs. The RCMP. There's a whole video about it on YouTube. I did a video recently incorporating a little clip from the RCMP training video. And it was really good. It was really good. I'll see if I can find it. Here it is. Here it is. Pup Patrol inside the RCMP's Police Dog Service Training Centre. 23 minutes. I'll put a link to this.
Each hole has the ability to put distractors in it, so we can put other...
And they've got a really good system. They've got a breeding program where they breed their own German Shepherds. This is for like general police dog work. They've got a really nice training centre. And still, they don't seem to be that enamoured with training their dogs in human remains detection. Look at them little puppies. So they've got their own kennels where they breed these dogs. They have all this, like the training centre set up to have all these different environments in it. There's an example of maybe it's up here. Here. They've got this room where they've got these boxes with holes in, and they place scents like behind these holes, and the dog has got to like walk around the room. And he gets his reward like from coming through that hole. It's just real. They have a really good. So they've obviously spent money on this training centre. Why have they not invested in more dogs that can detect human remains? I don't understand why they don't have more dogs trained on human remains. It's nuts. Given that they know their own study that they did published in 2017 shows how successful their training program was. Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy? This is catching the bad guys. Oh, go and catch that bad guy. Go and get him. Go and get him. Go on. Boom. It's a really nice video. So do go and watch it. 23 minutes of your time. Showing, what the RCMP dogs actually do. And it's great. It's great. It's just a shame that they just haven't invested in cadaver dogs. And, we're in this situation where nearly 5 months have gone by in the case of Lilly and Jack, and we're only now getting cadaver dogs on scene. So that's his reward. That's his reward. Okay. All right. So I know this was pretty, niche stuff, but whenever there's dogs involved, you can guarantee that I'm going to be all over it. But I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna leave you alone and go back to my puppy, who's been very, very quiet for the last nearly 2 hours. So who knows what trouble she's got into. But all right, guys. All right. Thank you for joining me, as always. And did I get any donations? Didn't get any donations. That's okay. Thanks, as always, to the mods. Enjoy the rest of your day. Go and check out this morning's video where someone said that my channel is fake news. Go and check that out. That's funny. Really funny. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, guys. Bye-bye.